Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. We're thrilled that Rep. Blazejewski again this year introduced a bill that is being referred to as the Act on Climate 2020 bill. It's great to hear that the Department of Environmental Management is on board and supporting it. I'm the Vice President and Rhode Island Director at the Conservation Law Foundation, and along with a number of other groups in the environmental community, this is our absolute #1 top priority piece of legislation this year. Climate change, global warming, the climate crisis, climate damage, whatever you want to call it, it's a huge problem. It affects almost every aspect of our lives, and we're literally in the midst of it happening all around us. Some kinds of emergencies that pop up, our government is really good at dealing with. For example, if you have a short-term emergency or hopefully a short-term emergency like the coronavirus or Superstorm Sandy, we see our government really stepping up and addressing the problem. Unfortunately, with problems like climate change that are looming large, the government doesn't necessarily act with the same urgency. And we need to treat climate change like the emergency it is and take immediate action to address it. Climate change is already happening in Rhode Island, and we're seeing it in numerous different ways. Sea levels are rising. They're projected to rise 9 feet by 2100. DEM recently announced the closure of the road at Beavertail in Jamestown. This is probably the first of many road closures we're going to see. Temperatures are rising. Rhode Island is the first state in the lower 48 to be up 2 degrees Celsius. Narragansett Bay is impacted with its temperatures rising. In the real estate industry, we've already seen lost $44.7 million in appreciation. So climate change really is happening here now around us. It's affecting us in many ways. And it is fossil fuels that are driving the climate crisis. Fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas do a lot to harm the environment when they're extracted, refined, and transported. And when we burn fossil fuels, they don't only cause climate-damaging emissions, they also cause other kinds of air pollution. The public health impacts from burning fossil fuels are estimated to be about $5.3 trillion worldwide. This disproportionately affects communities that are the most vulnerable, namely minority and low-income populations. They're more likely to live near facilities that produce high amount of pollutants, facilities such as ports, airports, highways, and petrochemical facilities. Right here in Rhode Island, we see this in the Port of Providence on Allens Avenue with extremely high asthma rates. In addition, when we're spending money on fossil fuels, we are sending money out of the state of Rhode Island because fossil fuels are not produced here. There are lots of people here to testify about climate change, and I think that demonstrates the widespread interest in this. Voters are interested in climate change. Poll after poll after poll is showing that climate change is a top priority for voters. The financial industry is concerned about climate change. We've seen JP Morgan and BlackRock say that they are going to begin divesting from fossil fuels. Universities care about climate change. Just this week, the president of Brown University made an announcement. She said, and I quote, "Climate change may be the single most pressing problem that society faces today." I think we've heard from the sponsor and the director about exactly what the bill does, and we think all of the aspects are important. We've got to change our targets so they keep up with science. We've got to have a mechanism to hold the state accountable to make sure it acts and we actually reach these requirements for emissions reductions. And there's also a transparency piece in the bill, which will have public metrics and a dashboard so the public can see what kind of energy we're using and where we are in terms of being on track to meet these emissions reductions. The bill gives government a ton of discretion to figure out which sector they're going to focus on first and how they're going to address their emissions, and that is based on feedback that we have heard in the past. They want to be able to figure out which sector to focus on first and how the different tools that they want to use to reduce our emissions. I just want to emphasize that it is really important that Rhode Island take action on climate. We may be a small state, but we are all in this together, and everybody has got to step up. Tackling the climate crisis is actually going to be good for us in a lot of ways. We'll be spending less money on fossil fuels, keeping more money in Rhode Island. Reductions in pollution will keep us healthier, and it'll save money on healthcare. Switching to electrical vehicles is shown to save money. Weatherizing houses also saves money. And climate solutions support economic growth, clean energy, and more jobs. We're all very proud that we have the first in the nation offshore wind farm Just last week, we opened up an offshore wind innovation hub in Providence. So there are a lot of benefits to addressing the climate crisis. We're also not going it alone. Other states have climate laws requiring mandatory greenhouse gas emission reductions. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, and Vermont is looking at a similar bill right now. Rhode Island is also part of the U.S. Climate Alliance. That's a group of 25 states that got together when the administration decided it was going to back out of the Paris Agreement. Those states, those 25 states, including Rhode Island, if you add up their emissions, we're actually the 6th worst emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So we really are part of the problem, and we need to be part of the solution.